It is 7 o'clock in the UK. Good to see you this morning. A taste of things to come. As a review of what we should be eating is served up, we'll be taking a look at what's on the menu to reduce our waistlines and cut carbon emissions. Plus, why the Prime Minister is keen to make sure that no one loses out as part of his so-called levelling up agenda for the UK. We'll be asking the Housing Secretary, Robert Jenrick, about that in just a few minutes' time.
Come on, Sal, run it in!
Remarkable this. Who Dares wins. 15-year-old Sal Hussein will be telling us what it's like being the youngest person to complete the SAS endurance trial, carrying a £35 pack on his back. Also this morning, we'll be speaking to the award-winning singer-songwriter Tom Odell, who's used the experience of his own mental health problems to create his latest album. It is Thursday, 15th of July. Not robbing Peter to pay Paul. Boris Johnson to argue that his levelling up agenda is a win-win for everyone as he sets out his post-pandemic vision for the UK. Breaking news this morning reports as many as 30 people are missing after several houses collapsed during heavy rain and flooding in Western Germany. We'll have the latest. Snack attack calls for attacks on sugar and salt, with food and veg prescribed on the NHS as part of a national food strategy for England.
We have reduced salt, we have reduced sugar, but there's only so far you can go until someone says that's bland.
Winter warning. Scientists claim as many as 60,000 people could die from flu as a combination of seasonal viruses and COVID-19 could overwhelm the NHS. Toxic claims. Britney Spears breaks down in tears and tells an LA court she wants her father charged with conservatorship abuse. Going for a song. Now, music streaming means musicians and songwriters are receiving meagre returns for their work.
Mainly dry, sunny and warm. The summer weather is finally here, but how long will it last for? I'll have the answer for you later.
Morning all. Boris Johnson will today set out his post-pandemic plan to level up the UK. In a speech later today, the Prime Minister will stress his flagship programme will benefit the whole country. But some of his MPs are nervous. They fear seats in the Conservative Southern Heartlands could be starved of funds to bolster their new parliamentary constituencies in the North and the Midlands. Our political correspondent Joe Pike reports now from Birmingham.
We're going to level up.
My government will level up.
We are serious about wanting to level up.
It's supposedly the central project of Boris Johnson's premiership. But could investment in newly Conservative constituencies in the north come at the expense of the party's heartlands in the south? Just last month, the Tories lost the previously true blue seat of Chesham and Amersham to the Lib Dems. Today, the Prime Minister will try to allay some of those concerns. He's expected to say, we don't want to decapitate the tall poppies, we don't think you can make the poor parts of the country richer by making the rich parts poorer. Levelling up is not a jam-spreading operation. It's not robbing Peter to pay Paul. It's not zero-sum, it's win-win. Part of that plan is about regenerating high streets and improving businesses like this one in Birmingham. Its outdoor space has tripled in size since rules were temporarily relaxed during the pandemic. Boris Johnson wants to make that permanent.
Wow, I mean, that would be wonderful. Being able to have the extended area outside permanently, it means a lot to me in terms of the business, but also personally, because it's very important for me to improve the street scene and create nice dining experience for people outside and all year round. I think it's what people want.
Making outdoor dining like this permanent seems a popular idea, but if Boris Johnson really wants to change the country, it'll cost. He's already spent hundreds of billions of pounds on the government's response to COVID, and if the Prime Minister really wants to level up, he'll need to explain how he'll pay for it.
What I really hope we don't see is that having spent 10 years basically trashing the economy, trashing poorer places, flat wages, the government just throws a few quid on the table and says, here you go, that's now levelling up. That's what you might call Bullingdon Club economics, where you smash up the restaurant, throw a few tenors on the table and ask the staff to just make do. We don't need Bullingdon Club economics. We need a proper strategy to create equal rights and fair chances in this country.
Today's speech is just the vision. We'll have to wait until the autumn for the detail. Joe Pike, Sky News, Birmingham.
And I am reliably informed that technical issues have been put to one side, and we do indeed have the Housing Secretary, Robert Jenrick, joining us on the programme once again. Very good morning to you, Mr Jenrick.
Good morning.
We have, of course, heard an awful lot about levelling up. It has been one of Boris Johnson's mantras since he became Prime Minister. Just tell us a little about what we will be hearing from the PM later today.
Well, the PM's going to be making a speech in the West Midlands, which reaffirms our commitment to levelling up all parts of the country. One of the absolutely central tenets of our manifesto back in 2019, before the pandemic, and which feels even more important than ever now as we're moving into a different period of living with the virus and recovering our economy. And he's going to say that we want to ensure that all parts of the country benefit from this agenda. It's not about the north versus the south. It's not about taking down the richer areas in order to build up the poorer ones. It's to everyone's benefit. This is a national win-win. And we're going to do this by investing in skills, in transport, in culture, and ensuring that there's more pride in places like high streets and town centres. And we also want to give more power back to local communities, because we are one of the most centralised countries in the world. And so we're going to be supporting local mayors like Andy Street here in the West Midlands, where I am this morning, and local councils and communities, so that they can take greater charge of their own destiny as we build back better.
As you say, this was a manifesto commitment back in 2019, the Prime Minister needing today to reaffirm it. I'm just wondering if anything has actually been done on the levelling up agenda since it was announced.
Yes, it has. We've actually made a huge amount of progress despite the pandemic. In my own department, we've been working in 30% of the towns of England, ensuring over £10 billion, the largest ever injection of investment in regeneration, took place. And where I am in Wolverhampton today is one of the recipients of that. To give you an example of levelling up in action, we're investing £40 million in the high street and town centre here in Wolverhampton so that the city can move forwards. We're also working with Andy Street on the tram so that people can get into Birmingham, can access HS2 when that arrives, to get better connectivity to high-paying jobs. And later today, I'm going to be looking at my own government department, which is moving to Wolverhampton so that a young person growing up here can access just the same opportunities as somebody growing up in London who might want to work for government. That feels to me is exactly what levelling up is all about.
Well, the white paper will be published in the autumn, and we all await it with bated breath. But, of course, we are about 4 days from what some previously called Freedom Day. I just wondered, with the guidance that emerged to hospitality and retail last night, essentially being the same as it has always been, face masks still expected to be worn in shops, table service should remain in bars and restaurants, customers should be checking in when they enter these premises. I'm just wondering whether we can justify telling businesses to carry on in the way in which they have done, having labelled this day Freedom Day.
Well, what we are saying is that although we're in an immeasurably better position thanks to the vaccine programme, we're still very much living with the virus, and we're going to be for a long time. And so we do need to exercise caution. The vaccine programme has enabled us to move into a different phase where it's not going to be a matter of law that these restrictions and inhibitions remain in place, but it will be a matter of personal responsibility. And so we're asking every member of the public to be cautious, to come to sensible judgments about, for example, the wearing of masks in close contact in indoor spaces, and for businesses as well to consider whether they want to and need to apply those restrictions. And you can already see that organisations such as TfL, which manages the Tube in London, have come to, in my opinion, a perfectly sensible judgment that in the close confines of the Tube, you should be using a mask. And there's also some supermarkets that are coming to that conclusion as well. And we as the government
there are others, though, however, in the sector
that come to those conclusions.
Sure. There are others, however, in the sector that are suggesting that it's just another confused mess. I mean, Hugh Osmond, founder of the restaurant group Various Eateries, what was billed as Freedom Day is actually going to be Chaos Day. I can't see how anyone is supposed to know what to do. It's Wednesday, and I can't tell you what we're going to do on Monday. Roger Barker, Policy Director at the Institute of Directors, whilst it is right that companies should be allowed to make their own decisions based on their unique circumstances, it is vital that government provide businesses with best practice in developing their own policies. I mean, all of this is just simply passing the buck. You talk about personal responsibility, you're essentially handing all the responsibility over to the business leaders, the business community, and they don't know what to do.
Well, I disagree with that. We have provided...
You disagree with Hugh Osmond and Roger Barker?
With respect, I disagree with them. We've published guidance today, which you've been quoting, and the guidance reflects the huge diversity of businesses across the country. If you're a business that's operating in a space where there's lots of room, it's very unlikely that people are coming into close contact, then they'll come to a different judgment to, for example, Waterstones, who I understand have announced that they will be asking their customers to wear masks. And, some of their stores are quite small. People might be lingering whilst they're reading books. And that seems, again, a logical decision. And so we trust businesses, just as we trust members of the public, to come to sensible,
I'm not so sure that the business community would agree.
decisions.
I'm not so sure the business community would agree that you trust them. I mean, not a mention of vaccine passports passed the Prime Minister's lips when he announced all of this on Monday. We're now hearing that COVID passports could be used to get into bars and restaurants.
Well, no. Once again, we're saying that there will be some situations where businesses might choose to pursue these policies using their best judgment. And in my experience, having talked to literally hundreds of businesses over the course of the last year, this is the sort of discretion that they want, reflecting the fact that businesses are often in very different situations, and a one-size-fits-all approach backed by the force of the law isn't sensible when we're moving into a period now where, in all likelihood, we're going to be living with the virus for a long time, and we need to take a different approach. That's what we're doing. And personally, I think that there's every reason to believe that members of the public and businesses and operators of transport systems, for example, like the tram here in the West Midlands, that those organisations will come to sensible conclusions. I think that the evidence I've seen so far from the businesses that have announced their intentions, they do seem to be coming to logical decisions of what they intend to do, at least initially. Then no doubt they'll keep it under review as the virus progresses.
Part 2 of the Dimbleby food strategy released today, and an awful lot of talk around sugar and salt taxes. I mean, first and foremost, is that something that the government is considering? And secondly, I just wanted to find out your views on potentially sitting down to a plate full of cultured meat, which is another one of the interesting proposals being outlined today.
Well, this is an independent review. It was commissioned by government a couple of years ago, but we haven't had any control over the findings that Richard Dimbleby has come to. Henry Dimbleby, sorry, they're interesting findings. The Environment Secretary is going to consider them and then bring forward our own food strategy in the coming months. So I'm not going to comment on the individual proposals. It does raise a very significant issue for the whole country, clearly. Our relationship with food and farming is really important on a whole range of different levels, from backing those businesses here in the UK, instilling a sense of pride in us supporting local food, obviously health and health inequalities, which are even more prominent as we come out of the pandemic, and our role internationally in striking trade deals and ensuring that we uphold high standards for our food supply. So there's a lot of very important issues that are raised by this report, but we're going to consider them carefully and then set out our own proposals in the coming months.
Mr. Jenrick, always good to have you on the programme. Thanks for being with us. Some breaking news now. The latest unemployment figures for the 3 months leading up to May have just come out. Our man in the know, our business correspondent, Paul Kelso. Paul, let us know. What do we know?
The headline unemployment rate for the quarter to May, Neil, was 4.8%, and that is a fall in the number of people unemployed, a modest one, a 0.2% fall in unemployment, but continues the recovery in the labour market that we've seen since the economy began to unlock, since the restrictions you've just been discussing began to be eased. Now, unemployment is still almost 1 full percentage point higher than it was pre-pandemic, but the Office for National Statistics, who've released these figures this morning, say it does show this continued recovery in the labour market. The number of payrolled employees gives us an idea of how quickly it is recovering. 365,000 more people on payrolls. That implies full-time work in the quarter than in the previous quarter. That, again, still 200,000 fewer than pre-pandemic, but showing signs of that recovery. Jobs amongst for men appear to be recovering faster than amongst women. Still subdued, the labour market for women. Of course, we know many of the roles in the sectors of the economy worst affected by COVID and lockdown were filled by women. There's also signs of young people coming back into work. Again, the young, the most affected, the 16 to 24 bracket, those most likely to have lost their jobs or to have been furloughed during COVID. There's another interesting figure in here, almost 10% more vacancies, that is jobs available, jobs needing to be filled now than there were pre-COVID. Of course, you might expect that. Pre-COVID, the labour market has not been hit by this huge shock, but it does give us this slight anomaly. We have people who are more people unemployed, but employers out there with lots of vacancies to fill. So this is a sign of this huge shock that hit the labour market that is still being worked through as we emerge from lockdowns.
Paul, many thanks indeed. Still to come on the programme, just after past, I'll be finding out how the COVID pandemic has led to millions of children missing out on vaccinations for other diseases. At 20 to 8, I'll be speaking to Minette Batters of the National Farmers Union about the call for people to eat far less meat in future to help protect us and our environment. And we'll also be discussing COVID injuries with Professor Callum Semple, who's urging young people to get vaccinated to protect their lungs against COVID scarring. And we'll be discussing that at 8:05. But you might have heard me mention to Robert Jenrick just a couple of minutes ago, a new salt and sugar tax is among drastic changes needed to encourage us to change the food we eat and the way it's produced because of the damage it's doing to us as individuals and to the planet. According to food entrepreneur Henry Dimbleby, who set out a new report on our food strategy and says we're eating too much junk food and too much meat. Well, the report finds that poor diet contributes to an estimated 60,000 deaths a year in England and costs the economy an estimated £74 billion. It warns that the food we eat accounts for around a quarter of greenhouse gas emissions and is the leading cause of biodiversity destruction. It therefore calls for the introduction of a landmark sugar and salt tax, with some of the money raised used to expand free school meals and support healthier diets in people living in the most deprived communities. The report also calls for food education to become a central part of the national curriculum. And it wants food standards to be protected in new trade deals, as Gerard Tubb reports.
The amount of sugar and salt we eat in the food we buy is making us ill and has to be drastically reduced. That is one of the findings from the National Food Strategy Review, which calls for new salt and sugar taxes to persuade businesses to change their recipes. Some think it won't work.
We've looked at everything we do. You know, we have reduced salt, we have reduced sugar, but there's only so far you can go until someone says that's bland. So what do? Excuse me, can we have the salt? Can we have the sugar? You know, and they just put it on themselves.
The report says the tax could add a penny to a packet of crisps, 7.5 pence to a small bar of chocolate. It also says we have to cut the meat we eat by 30% over 10 years and use more farmland to improve the environment.
This report pulls no punches. It starts by saying the food we eat and the way we produce it is doing terrible damage to our planet.
To improve the nation's health, it says low-income families need more help, with 1 million extra free school meals a day and free fresh fruit and vegetables on prescription. Although at this food bank, the idea got a mixed response.
I don't really eat fresh fruit and veg, really.
Why not?
It's just something I'm not used to.
It's doing me good because I just found out I have diabetes and I've got to eat a lot of fruit.
This is called Ascophyllum nodosum.
And the government is being told alternative sources of food need to be developed. This marine biologist makes ingredients from seaweed and says change can come fast.
This is already being done. You know, we're doing this at scale. But the point is that, especially around the UK, there's huge opportunity to really advance that scale in a sustainable way. So it's step changes, but we can scale up very, very quickly.
This review was commissioned by the government for England. The devolved nations will develop their own food strategies. But these findings are likely to be influential. Gerard Tubb, Sky News, Stokesley.
Well, at 9:15, the man who drew up that national food strategy, Henry Dimbleby, will be on the programme talking about tackling our love of meat and junk food. Scientists say as many as 60,000 people could die from flu this winter, as a lethal mix of seasonal virus combined with COVID-19 could leave the NHS unable to cope. Well, let's see much more from our health correspondent Ashish Joshi about this. Morning, Ashish. I put in the conditional there, but people will be worried looking at that figure of potentially as many as 60,000 deaths.
Yeah, let's put this in some context, Neil. Obviously, 60,000 is an alarmist figure. And that, I think, has to be couched in very specific terms. Now, this is a figure at the high end of the scale, the top end of the scale, if there are no interventions in place. This is a report commissioned by Sir Patrick Vallance. He wanted to look at sort of the pressures that would be facing the NHS as it approached winter. This winter is very different to the last, and there's specific reasons for that. Last year, there were interventions in place. It was social distancing, and the society was pretty much shut down. So that meant that the seasonal respiratory illnesses that we have every winter, the flu season, which claims between 10 and 30,000 lives, that didn't happen. People were dying instead of COVID-19. This winter, we're likely to have these seasonal respiratory illnesses roaring back, and there will be less resistance, less natural immunity to these seasonal viruses. We'll also have COVID in our populations, and then you have the additional pressures on the NHS, the things we see every winter, the shortage in bed capacity, staff numbers reduced significantly. So all of these could, if they're not tackled in advance of this winter, have a devastating impact. That was the warning. And remember, this is the 60,000 at the very top end of this prediction. What the scientists say we must do to protect the NHS, to stop it becoming overwhelmed, is to have an autumn booster vaccine program, and also a way of identifying who has flu and who has COVID-19. So this could be a simple test carried out in GP surgeries or in clinics. And this is a warning that action must be taken now to prevent this sort of pressure on the NHS come the winter.
Ashish, thank you. Some of the day's other news now, and the number of soldiers deployed on the streets of South Africa has doubled to 5,000 as the army and police struggle to quell days of looting and violence in Durban and Johannesburg. President Cyril Ramaphosa is considering boosting troop numbers further. At least 72 people have died in the worst unrest in the country for years. Brazil's President Jair Bolsonaro has been admitted to hospital after suffering from hiccups for 10 days in a row. He tweeted a picture of himself in his hospital bed a few days ago. He said he has the condition 24 hours a day. It's thought he may need emergency surgery. A complete reset of the music streaming model is needed in order to properly reward musicians. That's according to MPs on the Digital, Culture, Media and Sport Committee, whose report on the economics of streaming on sites like Spotify, Apple Music and YouTube Music warns that the current system only provides pitiful returns for singers and songwriters. The report's recommendations include the introduction of measures allowing music creators to recapture the rights to their work from labels after a period of time.
Artists can earn less than 0.1 pence in the pound for every stream that they sell, and that some in a year can make a couple of £100. Now, the live music trade was sort of papering over the crux of that. But during the pandemic, they've not been able to do that. So now we're finding that many musicians are really struggling, and therefore we have looked at the industry itself. And what we found is that there are pitiful returns, and that basically the big companies are making huge money, but artists and those, frankly, music lovers who love the music produced by those artists are losing out.
The world's rarest stamp is returning to Britain permanently for the first time in 140 years by armoured truck. The 1856 British Guiana 1 cent magenta stamp was bought for $6.2 million last month. It's been protected by intense security, including being kept in a zero oxygen frame. Britney Spears has told a court in Los Angeles she wants her father charged with conservatorship abuse. In an emotional hearing, she listed a series of grievances, including being denied vitamins and coffee, telling the court that that's not abuse, that's just cruelty. Greg Milan reports now from LA.
For those who march in support of her, there is a sense that victory's coming for Britney Spears, that the campaign to free her from the legal arrangement she says has controlled her life for 13 years is paying off. After a lifetime in the spotlight, it's now in a courtroom she's making herself heard. For the second time in 3 weeks, this time winning the right to pick her own lawyer to try to end the conservatorship once and for all.
It was another impassioned address to the court by Britney Spears, laying bare what she described as the cruelty of some of the conditions this conservatorship imposes on her, and after 13 years, demanding once again that it should end.
She accused her father, Jamie Spears, of ruining her life as conservator and abusing the process. His lawyer said such allegations were unsubstantiated. She celebrated the court's decision by posting this video of her horse riding and turning cartwheels. She thanked her fans. "You have no idea what it means to me," she wrote, signing off with the hashtag #FreeBritney. Those fans are delighted.
We've been laughed at, we've been called conspiracy theorists, but to hear Britney herself confirm, these things that we've been fighting for her, it is a little validating. But again, I can't fully celebrate until she's completely free.
For many of those listening in to reports from inside court, this is also about others subject to conservatorships.
Imagine all of the people who don't have anybody to speak up for them, who are having their money taken, their bodily autonomy, they don't have freedom. This is America. I mean, it's unbelievable that it's still happening to anybody, so it's kind of disturbing to consider that it's taken all of this just for one little thing to change since 2008 for somebody who's so famous.
It may yet take some time, but it does now seem inevitable that Britney Spears will get the freedom she and her fans so desire. Greg Milan, Sky News, Los Angeles.
30 people are reported to be missing following the collapse of houses during heavy rain in the town of Schuld in western Germany. Let's speak to our reporter, Shingi Mararike, who's more on this. Morning, Shingi. It is perhaps a testament to the strength of these floods that as yet we haven't been able to get in there and secure some pictures. Just tell us what we know.
Morning. So we do know that these are once-in-a-generation floods that have hit parts of western Germany. So far, reports are saying that 4 people have died and 30 people are also missing. It's not known whether that set of 4 people who have unfortunately lost their lives are part of the further 30 missing. But the German Weather Service has put in place an extreme weather warning for 3 further parts of the western region of the country, and the reports are startling. We have heard that that firefighters have drowned, that the army has needed to be deployed to help in the relief effort, and the nearby city of Hagen, which has a population of around 180,000 people, there's a weather warning in place there because the river has burst its banks, and what officials are saying there is that those are floods the floods of the magnitude that you only see 4 times in a century. People are being asked to evacuate. Anyone who lives on lower ground has been asked to move from the city. So the pictures that we've not been able to receive so far sound startling, and the situation will get worse.
Shingy, many thanks indeed. Well, let's reflect on that and indeed the weather situation here in the UK. Naz is standing by. Well, Naz, of course, we had some pretty significant flooding in parts of London just the other day. Is it the same weather pattern that's affecting Germany?
Yes, well, across central parts of Europe at the moment, there's a deep thundery low, and that is what is bringing those extremely intense rainfalls across parts of Germany and many central parts of Europe, not just for Germany. And it's a lot of rain in a short space of time, well over a month's worth of rainfall falling in just a few hours, hence the fact that there was a flooding issues. The same too happened across western parts of London. So it is remaining wet across many parts of central Europe as well. That thundery low is still going to be sticking around there for the next couple of days too.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. Well, it looks like summer weather has finally arrived across many parts of the UK and Ireland. For the rest of this week, there will be plenty of sunshine, dry weather and warmth as well. In fact, it will be locally becoming rather hot, particularly across parts of the south, where we are likely to see temperatures reach up to 30 to 31 degrees Celsius on Sunday. That will be the first time this year, and in fact, since September last year, that we've seen temperatures rise above 30 degrees Celsius. It's quite unusual for it to be this late in the season. This morning, it's a mild morning. It's bright for many areas, but northern and western parts quite cloudy with some drizzle, especially for the northwest of Scotland, northern and western parts of England and Wales. Some central areas also quite cloudy, but brightening up with lots of sunshine this afternoon. But it may take some time for it to brighten up for Ireland and Northern Ireland. Northwest Scotland stays quite cloudy with some drizzle, and then later cloud amounts increase with cool conditions across East Anglia and the southeast.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Naz, thank you. Still to come, the vaccination fallout. After the break, we'll be hearing how the COVID pandemic has led to millions of children missing out on vaccinations for other diseases. That's next. Welcome back. The government has been accused of putting out confusing messages about whether people should or shouldn't wear a mask when England emerges from lockdown. Many businesses, including some shops, say they will be asking people to wear them, even though it won't be mandatory across the country. A little earlier in the programme, the Housing Secretary Robert Jenrick told me it was down to personal responsibility and that different businesses will exercise different rules.
If you're a business that's operating in a space where there's lots of room, it's very unlikely that people are coming into close contact, then they'll come to a different judgment to, for example, Waterstones, who I understand have announced that they will be asking their customers to wear masks. And, you know, some of their stores are quite small. People might be lingering whilst they're reading books. And that seems, again, a logical decision. And so we trust businesses, just as we trust members of the public, to come to sensible, reasonable decisions.
Let's bring in our political correspondent, Tamara Cohen. Morning, TC. Trusting the public, trusting businesses to get it right. However, there are some business leaders suggesting that they could have a little bit of a hand in working out exactly what best practice is.
This is right. The guidance to businesses was published by the government last night, and after being told of Freedom Day, throwing off all restrictions, suddenly we're being told that masks are recommended, visors are recommended, checking in with your phone when you get to a bar or restaurant, having table service, all that should continue in order to prevent the transmission of the virus, which, as Robert Jenrick was saying, is going to be with us for some time. Now, he was saying this is what businesses want. They want discretion. But of course, if you're a pub saying you have to wear your mask when walking around and you have to check in on your phone, and there's another pub down the road that isn't doing that, you can see where the problems start. And that's why groups representing business leaders like the Institute of Directors are saying this is confusing. We want the government to actually set out what they want us to do rather than just giving this strong guidance. And of course, this is going to be the problem for ministers going forward, how they enforce it if people say it's so confusing, we do different things in different situations. vaccinations.
Tamara, for now. Thanks very much indeed. Now, new data shows that the lives of millions of children needing protective vaccines have been put at risk by the global COVID pandemic. Children are in danger of catching measles, diphtheria, whooping cough and other illnesses because vaccination programmes have dropped off drastically. We're joined now on the programme by Kate Causey from the University of Washington's School of Medicine. She was one of the lead authors on the study. Kate, really good to see you this morning.
Thank you for having me.
No, our pleasure, our pleasure. Just give us an idea of how many children may have missed vaccinations and where those vaccination programmes are being missed.
Yes, so we published results today looking at the third dose of diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis, and the first dose of measles containing vaccines around the world. And those estimates suggest that an additional nearly 9 million children missed doses of each of those vaccines across the globe.
It is remarkable when you think about the progress that we have made over the past century in getting global vaccination programmes up and running. I mean, what are the health dangers in all of this?
Well, with each of these vaccines, we're likely to see outbreaks of vaccine-preventable diseases, as you mentioned, diphtheria, whooping cough, measles, especially as vaccination coverage rates dip below expected levels and below target levels.
Is this going to have a knock-on effect on the adult population, or is it simply a question of getting as much resource together to ensure that the children who have missed out, get vaccinated as soon as possible?
Well, it's hard to know. I think that if we've learned anything this year, we've learned that our health around the globe is connected to each other. And so making a concerted effort to make sure we are prioritizing routine immunization programs and providing targeted outreach to children who've missed doses of these important vaccines will be essential for protecting the health of children and all of us.
We know, of course, when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccination programme, countries in Africa, particularly in sub-Saharan Africa, have been hardest hit. I mean, is it a similar situation in terms of the vaccinations that have been missed, diphtheria, whooping cough and so on?
Well, actually, in this analysis, we found that the most acute 2020 disruptions occurred in North Africa and the Middle East, South Asia, and Latin America and the Caribbean. Whereas in sub-Saharan Africa, we saw the smallest disruptions in 2020. And this may be due to the relatively smaller scale of the epidemic in that region, particularly in the earlier months of 2020. But it's also important to note that this region had the lowest pre-pandemic vaccine coverage levels, around only 70%. So any additional children missing doses in this region is very concerning for child health.
Yeah, it certainly is. Kate Causey from the University of Washington School of Medicine, thank you so much for being with us and staying up so late.
Thanks for having me.
Now, the food entrepreneur Henry Dimbleby has set out a new report on our food and says we're eating too much meat and not enough veg. He's calling for sustainable farming techniques and an equal division between intensive farming and environmentally friendly farming. Someone with a view on all of this, I'm sure. The president of the National Farmers Union, Minette Batters, joins us on the programme. Minette, great to see you this morning. So, what do you make of it?
Well, I've been part of Henry Dimbleby's advisory board, and I think actually what he is setting out is a new paradigm on food. And for me, representing 50,000 farmers, this is about getting back to cooking from scratch. It's about whole foods. Meat is a vital part of a healthy, balanced diet, something where we really need the macro and the micronutrients and the good that it puts back into the soil. So it is about a new paradigm on food. I think we need to get back to a more localised food system, a more added value food system. We need to be refocusing on procurement in our hospitals, our schools, buying British, making sure that we really are supporting farmers here. But, we've seen on the back of COVID how people are buying everything out of retail. British sales are growing and they are cooking from scratch, and things are really now, I believe, changing. We need to build on that.
But just in terms of the requirement that he puts on all of us, and it's a responsibility shared by everyone who eats meat, that we all need to eat rather less of it. That can't come as music to the ears of those who are involved in the domestic production of the meat that we eat.
I think farmers find this point absolutely infuriating, because actually, what he is mainly talking about is highly processed food. Not about people cooking from scratch, where they might go and buy some mince, buy steaks, buy a chicken breast. He is not talking about that. Yes, each and every one of us needs to eat more vegetables. I've always made the point that, farming here, what we are not consuming, we should be able to export to other countries that don't have the luxury of a grass-based system. We have a great climate here for growing grass, for feeding livestock. It's very different to other parts of the world. We have massive feedlot systems. Don't forget, we're signing trade deals whereby we will have no control of how much is coming in here, the different standards that it is produced to. And ultimately, this is about consumer choice and inspiring consumers to make the right choices, to cook from scratch, to use whole foods, whole ingredients, rather than what Henry is describing as a very highly processed food that is bad for our diet. So we've got to inspire people. This food brings people together. Food is a way of healing, the challenges that we have, but it's about education, and it's about culture as much as anything else. I think you don't want to hit people in the wallet. That has no impact on their waistline. Let's have this new conversation about food, and let's get people buying and cooking from scratch and buying whole foods.
Yeah, you're speaking.
Meat.
You're speaking to a Scotsman. You don't have to convince me of the benefits of Scottish beef, I have to tell you. Minette, really good to see you this morning. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you.
Now, still to come on the programme, people in Wales will be getting more freedom from this weekend, but will still be required to wear masks in crowded spaces. We'll be talking to the Economy Minister for Wales, Vaughan Gething, after the break.
Well, I mean, I've always been interested in flying, and really what got me interested into this aviation was, interested in flying around the world was when I started my around the world. When I started thinking about this, I was learning in gliders. I started flying in gliders when I was 12, and I went solo glide on my 14th birthday. And I read a magazine article about someone called Lachlan Smarts, who broke the world record back in 2014, and I just thought, I really want to do that. And I thought, if I want to, show and I want to motivate young people, to, no matter what happens, no matter what challenges get in your way, as long as you keep pushing towards your goals, that's how you can go and achieve them. So it's a Cessna 172 aircraft, built in 2001. It's my office, my home, my everything pretty much. And this is where I sit all the time. And yeah, quite a small aircraft, but enough for what I need. And I'll just show you with all the lights on, turning the battery master and the avionics master on. And this is essentially how I control the aircraft with these yokes here. I've had some absolutely amazing trips. Flying over the Grand Canyon was absolutely incredible, and the sights are absolutely amazing. As well as that, flying down the Hudson River in New York, over the Statue of Liberty really low, and actually flying down the river, and the skyscrapers in New York actually above like how high I was. So I was flying quite low. And but I've had definitely some scary moments. Had to deal with some pretty bad icing and bad wet winds. Had a scary moment over the Rockies in Montana, and I actually dropped about 2,000 feet in about 30 seconds, and it was a bit scary, but I got out of it fine. And other than that, the trip's been absolutely amazing. My mum and both my parents had some sleepless nights over me doing this trip, but they're very happy I'm back, and I think they're glad they let me go. I'm not too sure actually what's next. I'm planning to maybe fly around the world in an electric aircraft, break the world record of the first electric aircraft, but still got a way to go with the technology for that. I'm just aiming for the future.
I'm coming from a family of fishermen. Actually, my family has been fishermen for 5 generations. the fishermen catch this plastic by accident. So we give them the motivation and the system to bring it back to the land. We have collected already more than 110,000 kilos of plastic from the bottom of the sea.
Did you know symptoms of hay fever can develop at any stage of life, not just in childhood? The Pollen Reports, sponsored by Philips Connected Air Purifiers.
Sunshine will develop widely this afternoon and it'll be warm for most places too. However, Ireland and Northern Ireland may take a while to brighten up, and the east of Norfolk and Suffolk as well as the Hebrides will probably stay cloudy and cool all day. Pollen levels will be high or very high for most places today, but moderate across the north of Scotland. We are currently in the peak of the grass and spore season, and weed pollen is at a medium risk.
The Pollen Reports, sponsored by Philips Connected Air Purifiers.
Now, Wales will open up COVID restrictions further on Saturday, despite increasing numbers of cases across the country. It says that high vaccination rates mean hospital admissions remain low, so it is safe to go down to level 1. Joined now by the Economy Minister for Wales, Vaughan Gething. Minister, good to see you this morning. Thanks for being with us.
No problem, Niall. Good to see you too.
Just explain exactly what is going to be happening this weekend. And, of course, an awful lot of eyes in Wales will be on that date in August on which you could see the country moving to level 0.
OK, so from this Saturday, we're going to have a number of changes come in to move fully to alert level 1. That means that 6 people can meet up indoors in private homes and holiday accommodation. It means that organised indoor events can take place up to 1,000 seated and 200 standing. And our 2 ice rinks can reopen as well, although one of them is still being used as a vaccination centre. It also means children in groups of up to 30 are going to be able to visit children's residential centres together. There is, though, still a specific requirement to have the COVID risk assessment, and we still got indoor social distancing until the 7th of August. That's when we see a more significant change being made. With though moving to part of alert level 0 with outdoor events, not having a particular limit on those as well. So it's a significant step forward, and that is because whilst our case rates are high, they're 140 and 100,000, lowest in the UK, but lower, but still actually quite high. And you'll recall that it wouldn't have been that long ago, case rates of that number would have been going in reverse. We're not doing that because we've been really successful in rolling out our vaccination programme. That means that double dose people are much more protected, and we're not seeing the same level of harm come into our NHS. We've got 73% of adults in Wales having had both doses, and that's why we're looking forward to the 7th of August when we can release most of the remaining restrictions, and that's when nightclubs will be open here in Wales, for example. What we are doing, though, is we're keeping the requirements for face coverings to be worn in most public indoor settings. We think that's the right balance, both to prevent the potential spread of the virus, but also to give people some confidence. We've got lots of clinically vulnerable people who are concerned about the pace of movement out and whether they'll still be protected and able to enjoy the same freedoms as well.
What needs to happen, and indeed what needs not to happen between now and August the 7th for Wales to move to alert level 0? I note that you haven't described the process. The progress towards that date is irreversible.
No, because we've always been cautious and not wanting to give false hope. And the idea of absolutes through the COVID pandemic is not something that I think has actually lasted more than a few weeks. So we've always got to look at the public health position. That's both about case rates and harm coming into our NHS, and also if there's a new variant of concern circulating as well, because that on a regular point in time has changed our approach to the pandemic and how we keep Wales safe. In Wales, most people have done a really good job at all pulling together to keep Wales safe. We think that'll continue. The measures we're taking on face coverings, for example, it's a different set of measures being taken to England. So there's a need to make sure that people understand the rules for the country they're in if people are travelling in the UK. But I have seen your own piece, of course, where there are businesses in England calling for that greater clarity. So we think it's a very clear settlement that people can understand, rules that people can respect, and it's all part of us moving together to try to make sure we don't have to live with the restrictions we've all had to through the first part of the summer, and of course, a really, really difficult winter that I certainly don't want to return to.
Yep, sure. I do wonder then, given the different advice from the devolved administrations in Wales and Scotland and that from Boris Johnson's government, I mean, are you concerned about compliance with mask wearing, given that there will be different situations in different parts of the United Kingdom?
Well, it's an obvious risk, and you've been talking about confusion in England this morning. We're asking people to understand the rules for the part of the United Kingdom they're visiting or undertaking business in. We want people to have a great summer visiting in Wales, but to respect the rules that are in force here as well. And actually, from the point of view of the businesses that are going to need to enforce those rules, I think it's much easier to give the clarity and the simplicity that these are rules. It's not a choice that they're opting in or opting out of. There's a requirement for face coverings to be worn in a variety of settings. And I hope that clarity will make it easier to avoid the confusion that might otherwise exist, but also for people to do the right thing. The last resort is people arguing about whether they need to wear a face covering in a shop.
Sorry to interrupt, Minister, but does that mean will there come a point at which the Welsh administration gives people in Wales the responsibility for making these decisions themselves?
Well, there may be a point in time, but it's not going to take place this summer because we think that the clarity in the settlement that we've reached for indoor public spaces is the right balance of risk moving forward. We're not in a zero risk position now, even with the high levels of vaccination, with an expectation that by the 7th of August, 85% of adults would have had both vaccines. It's about the balance in those risks as ever. The settlement we've reached means there'll be more economic activity taking place, more freedoms for people to enjoy and to enjoy responsibly. And if we all keep on doing the right thing, then we can look forward to further freedoms and actually not going backwards to the position we've had to live through earlier on this year. But I just don't think it's helpful to try to forecast a point in time at which we may not need to wear face coverings. We're really looking to get to the end of this pandemic and to see a recovery undertaken that isn't going to be set back if we need to reimpose restrictions in the future.
Von Gething, thanks very much for being with us.
No problem.
Look forward to brighter skies. The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.
Good morning. Welcome to summer. Finally, summer weather is here with us for the rest of this week. For most places, it is going to be fine, dry, sunny and increasingly warm. In fact, today is St. Swithin's Day, and if you believe in the folklore, that means whatever the weather today is going to be sticking around for the next 40 days. So that makes my job easy. This is the forecast for the next 40 days. We start off with mostly fine conditions this morning. It's bright, it's mild, but it's quite cloudy across northern and western parts. But most of the low cloud, mist and fog will lift and clear. Good spells of sunshine, a very warm day, but cooler and cloudier around eastern coastal areas and across the far northwest as well. It will be cloudy with some light rain or drizzle.
The weather, sponsored by Qatar Airways.